Scott. Thanks for having me on today.
Yeah, my pleasure. So let me just straight up get your reaction. Supreme Court says New York can't tell people that they can't carry a weapon unless they have a direct threat against them. And that's going to affect about 5 or 6 other states that have similar laws. It's a great day for freedom and the Second Amendment in South Carolina and in the United States.
Well, as far as the Supreme Court ruling, you're absolutely right. The court just told us what we already knew, that the Second Amendment gives us our God-given rights that are enshrined in the Constitution to keep and bear arms, to protect ourselves, our homes, and defend our liberty. But it's kind of a sad day at the same time. I mean, the pendulum's swinging both ways. We had the Senate pass out a gun bill last night. The House will pass it out today. It's been rammed through without a whole lot of discussion, without hardly any debate on these issues like red flag laws and some of the things that are in there. So we've had sort of the tale of two policies here.
Well, and that's interesting because that's the way the New York Times looked at it this morning. They talked about the dichotomy between gun right protection at the Supreme Court versus the protection of innocent Americans that's taking place in the Senate and will happen in the House today. But I'm just curious, because I was talking about this before I cracked the microphone here with you. You know, it seems to me that those two things are related in one way, in that they both deal with guns, but they're unrelated in another way, in that one is about protecting the rights of law-abiding citizens to own and carry a firearm, and the measures coming out of the Senate seem to be directed toward people who would violate the law when it comes to owning a firearm. And so those two things seem a little bit different. But you're obviously are not real excited about this bill. Tell us why.
Well, I'm concerned about the red flag laws in general. And yeah, the Senate kind of punted this down to the states, and the states will create 50 hodgepodge laws dealing with red flag or the ability of law enforcement, if they're alerted to someone who might be violent. And it could be somebody that is vindictive and contacting law enforcement about somebody that truly isn't a harm to themselves or others, but then they have to prove their innocence. The thing in America, Tony, is that we're innocent until proven guilty.
Right.
And red flag laws assume the exact opposite. You're guilty until you prove your innocence, and that's not how the law is supposed to work. And so we've got that. There's some mental health stuff we passed out of the House that came through my committee that, you know, it's sort of in this bill. We've already done it in separate mental health legislation, not gun legislation. This is a backdoor way for them to get universal gun checks, background checks for gun purchases on individual transactions. You and I are friends, and if I want to sell you a firearm or give you a firearm, we'd have to go through a whole process of background checks. And this gets their toe in the door, and once the toe's in the door, the foot gets in the door, then the whole body's in the door, and we continue to see the erosion of some of our freedom. So,
how many Republicans do you think will vote for this in the House? Have you got any kind of feel? Have you talked to your colleagues about it?
I know the whip did. I'm not sure the number, and I'm not sure I could even divulge that if I knew it.
Oh, right. I apologize.
I know that Leader McCarthy has really come out strongly against it, as have most of the House leadership and people like me. So if I had to put a number on it, we'd probably get 12 to 18, probably the same number.
About the same as in the Senate.
The infrastructure bill. That was a 13 number, so that's probably where it will be.
Now, you talked about mental health legislation that came out of the House that you felt good about. So what is the relationship between gun ownership and mental health? How should that be addressed?
Well, there's a couple things. If you go back to, there was a Florida case years ago, and I think it was in the 1980s. I remember Representative Mike Pitts telling me about this. The involuntary commitment of people that have mental health issues by loved ones to get them the help they needed went away. And you started seeing a lot of changes in South Carolina, our whole hospital down there at Bull Street sort of started shutting down at that point. And hospitals are ended up having to deal with the mental health patients that were coming in, and they're not equipped for that. They don't have they all have some padded room type things, but they don't have the longevity that they need. So you get people prescribed with medication and kicked back out the door. So somehow a way to, and that's, I think, why we have so much homelessness around the country too, by the way. But
yeah,
some way we've got to correct that and allow mental health hospitals to actually crop up and have the guardrails that are necessary, but also treat the mental health patients that are out there. There's a huge drug issue there, too, that plays into the mental health side of it. That's one of the big things that I think is out there.
Let me see if this is correct, and then of course you correct me if I'm not stating your position right. You think that mental health issues need to be addressed, but it should be addressed separate from gun ownership. In other words, when you put those two things together,
yeah.
Okay, that's what I was hearing.
Yeah,
and
then the second thing is modernize our background check system. If you look at what happened in Las Vegas, that guy fell through the cracks. I think the Charleston shooter, that guy fell through the cracks in the NICS system. Couple of different reasons. The one in Vegas, I don't think that something was reported by the military to the FBI for the NICS system, or it didn't get put in the system. And why have a great system if the information that's necessary to make it effective doesn't get to where it needs to be?
Yeah.
We need to modernize that. And we're the 21st century. It's the computer age. We have technology. We've got to do something to make sure that there's a timely record for that individual that's trying to buy a firearm within that national background check system the FBI operates.
One of the interesting things said yesterday by Clarence Thomas, he's made this statement: the constitutional right to bear arms in public for self-defense is not a second-class right. Now, I wonder how that's going to come to bear on what passed out of the Senate last night when it comes to extra background check scrutiny for 18 to 21-year-olds. It seems to me that might be something. Obviously, these laws are going to be challenged constitutionally if it passes the House and gets the president's signature, which is likely. That the scrutiny would be: can you take an 18 to 21-year-old simply because of their age and assign to them a different level of scrutiny in order to be able to exercise their Second Amendment right? Sounds like Clarence Thomas maybe would say no. What do you think about that?
I think you're exactly right. You're creating, just based on age, we have to define what an adult is in this country. We say an adult can join the military at 18 without parental consent. Just as a sidebar, they can talk to their teachers and doctors about having sex change earlier than 18 without their parental consent, and that's just ludicrous. But so 18-year-olds can vote, 18-year-olds can buy cigarettes, and we changed the law where they can't buy alcohol, but we have constantly monkeyed with what an adult is in this country. Now you're saying if you're in that age group, you can't purchase a firearm, or you have to go through extra scrutiny. So it's the age group today. Is it a race or a sexual orientation tomorrow? And that's, I think, what Clarence Thomas is trying to say. We shouldn't create separate classes of citizens in this country. But at the same time, we've got to define what an adult is and start putting on that person responsibilities and obligations. I mean, you can be tried as an adult at 18. You can go to the death chair at 18 if you commit a crime. So, we just got to clarify that, I think, Tony.
Yeah, be consistent, in other words, in the way that we treat
That's correct.
That age group. Let me ask you about the Supreme Court in general, Congressman. I mean, we've seen a flurry of rulings here, and of course we're waiting on the big one, which is Roe versus Wade actually going to be overturned and that's sent back to the states? But the ones that are coming out now seem to represent the court the way that we thought it might be after Trump's appointments of the 3 justices that he put on the court. So, because you've got 6-3 rulings. So John Roberts has been much more likely in these last rulings to rule with the conservatives against the liberal minority. Is that a shift, do you think, for Roberts, or is it just that he happens to fall where he falls on these cases?
I think it's the case-by-case simplicity of it for John Roberts. He was a disappointment to a lot of us during the Obamacare ruling, but
yes.
I don't know that it's a shift in his mindset because there's other conservatives on the court. I just think it's the actual cases that are in front of them. One thing I do like is we're seeing more constitutional liberties affirmed, and we're seeing some limited government actions by the Supreme Court, given the EPA issue that's coming up today, to really limit what the EPA can do. They have this broad jurisdictional powers to make rules and laws. Congress never intended that. It points to us. We've got to be very clear and less ambiguous about what our laws say when we create these agencies like the Homeland Security or EPA or Interior or Energy or Education on what they can or cannot do and what the role of the legislative branch is versus the rulemaking of a federal agency that's under the executive branch. So I'm happy the court is ruling the way they are on these bills because I'm a constitutional liberty-minded person and I believe in limited government. I think that's where they're headed.
Yes, I'm very encouraged by it. Religious liberty appears to be at the top of their agenda, and that's something, of course, that's very near and dear to all of us. Let me shift gears here just for a second, and I don't want to keep you too long, but I want to talk a little bit about the war in Ukraine. I know that in my experience with you and our friendship over the years, I've known you to be a foreign policy expert. You know what's going on around the world. You know what these circumstances are, or how important they are, and what's really going on. Does Ukraine still have a chance to win this war, to get Russia to back off, or are we talking about a long, protracted situation here where attrition is just going to eventually be in favor of the Russians?
I think personally, this is just a personal opinion, not a government-informed decision.
Right,
but over time, Russia, they just have the manpower and the resources and can, continue this until they win. And I think Vladimir Putin cannot afford a loss back home in Russia if he wants to maintain power. So they're going to continue this as long as it takes. The Ukrainians are a very strong people. They're fighters, and they're going to continue. It'll be a long, protracted guerrilla-type war, even if we see Russia take some of the bigger cities like Kiev and others. So, unfortunately, that's what I see. I'll tell you what I'm concerned about, Tony, that you mentioned foreign policy. I'm concerned about this president, and, he falls off a bike, and he's seen this week around the country and around the world, and China is threatening Taiwan, and they know that this president would not defend Taiwan and live up to our treaty obligation. What does that mean if he doesn't with regard to other treaty obligations? And then what we see with China and Russia and Iran, for that matter, here in this hemisphere in South America. I talked with a lot of folks from down there and had the ambassador from Colombia in recently, and we talked about how Russia is posturing in some old names like Nicaragua and El Salvador and Venezuela and Cuba, and now they're using political and financial resources to influence power in Brazil and other places. China has been doing that a long time, and so we've got to be aware of what's going on closer to home, what it might mean, and then understand we have a very weak pacifist in the White House as commander-in-chief, and that alarms me.
Congressman, is there anything in particular you'd like to tell us this morning that we haven't covered, something that's on your mind?
I just feel for all my constituents, people across the country, not just South Carolina, that are paying an exorbitant amount for energy. They're paying an exorbitant amount for just the basic commodities. We passed a bill yesterday that dealt with feeding hungry children through the nutrition program at schools, free lunch and free and reduced lunch program that continues through the summer. And I voted for that because I felt like kids are out there. Their moms and dads are spending a lot of their paycheck on gasoline and inflated prices, and they might not be getting the nutrition. So just the children this summer that are facing so much across the country, and I don't want them to go hungry, and this is a program that helps feed them and keeps them ready for school, and that might be the only nutritious meal they get all day or all week. So that's just something I had on my heart this morning.
Do you still think, things still look very good for Republicans come the midterms?
Absolutely. I think the numbers are growing every day. We won the Mia Flores seat down in Texas, which is huge for Republicans and for women and Hispanics, and it kind of signals to the Democrats that we're going to win a big majority come November. It's a possibility to take the Senate. Herschel Walker wins in Georgia, which I think he should and would. And there's some other seats that might be in play across the country in the Senate. So Joe Biden's got a day of reckoning come January because he's not going to be able to get anything through. They're going to try to do executive orders and use the executive branch the way they can because they're going to have a very adverse House and Senate majority of the Republicans.
Congressman, we're very grateful for your leadership in Washington. You are one of the, if not the, most conservative representatives in Congress, and we appreciate that leadership from South Carolina. God bless you, brother.
God bless you, Tony. Thanks for having me on. I look forward to coming back.
Yes, sir.